Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest is a film that has been hailed as a masterpiece of its genre. From its iconic set pieces to its trumpeting score, North by Northwest stands as one of the most influential films ever crafted, lending direct inspiration to, among many, the James Bond series, Indiana Jones, and even Austin's popular South by Southwest music festival. Starring screen legend Cary Grant, his fourth and final collaboration with Hitchcock following Suspicion, Notorious, and To Catch a Thief, Northwest finds the charismatic actor in over his head as Roger Thornhill, an ordinary advertising man mistaken to be a government agent by a treasonous spy ring headed by the enigmatic Jamison. On the run for his life, Thornhill soon tangles with a mysterious femme fatale, 1950s DUI justice, and a deadly Midwestern farm visit as he heads wildly in a northwesterly direction, hoping to find the real government agent and clear his name. As with most Hitchcock productions, surprises abound, and without a restraint on spoilers, today we'll be taking a wild ride of our own as we ask the question, is North by Northwest required viewing? Welcome to Default Assault, where we take on everything by default. I am your host, Demosthenes, and with me today is our wonderful co-host, Mr. Kyle Nash. How's it going?
Good evening, Demosthenes. The only thing I would wonder in tonight's suspenseful episode is what took you so long to feature one of my types of productions. But we'll solve that this evening. Oh, sorry. It should be a profile shot.
No, there we go. Well, I had to set the stage for suspense. TJ, thank you for coming back. You have been officially unbanned since your liking of The Grinch. Congratulations.
It's been too long, man. I'm glad to be back. Being labeled as the bad boy of Hilarity by default, man, it carries some weight.
Tonight, we will be talking about Alfred Hitchcock's 1959 masterpiece, North by Northwest, starring Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint, Jamison, and Martin Landau. It has been considered one of the greatest films of all time and one of my personal favorites. I am excited to talk about it tonight and answer the question of whether or not it's required viewing. Now, it is my understanding that both of you had never seen this movie before. Is that right, Kyle?
It's one of those things where I had seen particular portions, but never all the way through. And well, we saw for that here leading up to this week's Default Assault. I made the worst possible mistake preparing for this movie as in my lifetime. In that I had seen Mel Brooks' parody movie, High Anxiety, before I experienced source material, or at least something that was a large portion of the source material in North by Northwest. Like, just as an example, I was still looking for the guy to be called Thorndike when in the proper name his movie's goddamn Thornhill.
Thornhill.
And it took me like a good 15 minutes to get reacquainted, But by the way, go see High Anxiety if you're worth, anything as far as a movie buff. I'm just saying.
Oh, it spoofs a lot more than just North by Northwest. I mean, that's that entire film is a parody of Hitchcock in general.
Strong stuff all the way around. I did not know going into this that there's so much stuff that's really the word often thrown around is stolen. I think that's too strong, but that this is the source and inspiration for a lot of other usage of particular devices that you see in movies. I'm like, oh, that's how they do that. And I'll give Hitchcock a lot of credit in this particular setup and movie, because there are certain things that if you try to do them, I feel like in modern filmmaking, they would not be performed as well, because they would feel like they would have to show everything. But Hitchcock was a very less is more kind of dude. There are portions of the beginning where he makes use of that, to even silly things at the end that both spin to that less is more, not giving you the how, where an entire fan base is pissed off by a lack of a backstory, because Snoke. But
Last Jedi reference, had to throw it in there.
Damn nerds. I'm an IT guy. That's an N word I can use. So, anyways, but
God damn.
Allow it.
But that being said, yeah, I mean, to watch that and see the early elements of the execution of certain things, sure, it might have come off as campy or ridiculous, but hey, listen, when your kid draws their first picture, it doesn't really look like anything, and it is later crafted into a full visual masterpiece. But yet it loses some heart from the scribbles that were just, hey, look what I'm doing, you know.
To take away from Kyle's point, I see a lot of movies, a lot of current movies that had to, in terms of music, sample from North by Northwest. They sampled it. I don't know if it's the hook or the bass line or whatever. They sampled from this movie. Hitchcock was the OG for movies, and now everybody is reaping benefits and making money off of the themes and things that he put in his films.
The only thing I really knew about North by Northwest beforehand was the crop duster scene, which is one of the most famous images from cinema history. When I was a kid, my parents used to love watching the original Peter Sellers Pink Panther films. There's a connection. Wait for it. And I used to watch it with them. I used to watch the animated opening credits and then I'd leave. But eventually, one day, I actually sat down and watched the first movie and I fell in love with it. And it co-starred David Niven, who I thought was a terrific English actor. And so I decided to start watching some of his films, which led me to a film called The Bishop's Wife, which I had previously talked about on the show, which starred Cary Grant. I'm like, Cary Grant, this guy is awesome. Let me see what else he's done.
I have to throw in a PSA to all default assault viewers. Please do not use The Bishop's Wife as a drinking game because you will fucking die. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, I'm laying the foundation for my foundation argument. There's another drink for you default assaulters out there. So eventually, I remember going to the library, picking up the VHS, and seeing the drawing of Cary Grant getting chased by the plane. I'm like, this is the movie. I know what this is. Hitchcock. He's the guy who did Psycho. I hadn't seen Psycho yet. This was going to be my first Alfred Hitchcock film. And I remember sitting back and watching it, and just it probably really sparked my love. I mean, I had a love for cinema, but it really sparked my love for the craftsmanship behind cinema, and I immediately started making those connections. Many people have referred to it as the first James Bond film. Sean Connery, in an interview in 1964 during the success of Goldfinger, he credited North by Northwest as the inspiration for the tone and feel of the series. Without it, it wouldn't exist. And ergo, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Guillermo del Toro, who's nominated for Best Director this year, has touted North by Northwest as one of his inspirations, especially for the use of color in film. So for me, it kind of changed a lot of, it enhanced my appreciation for film.
Here's the thing. When I'm watching it, a lot of the famous stuff didn't really do it for me as much as just some of the dialogue and delivery. Like, some of my favorite scenes were right at the beginning where he's first being interrogated as with the wrong name, and it's like he keeps trying to tell the guy his name is Roger Thornhill, not Thorndike, Kyle, Thornhill, and those to me were the really moving things. Obviously, because it is a 50s production, there is some cheesy shiznit in there. I'm not going to elaborate on what just yet. We'll get to that later. But the punchline to all that is that for me, there are the landmark moments in the movie, like the crop duster scene. For me, not so much. I'll be honest with you. It was a great device and a great way to get him out in the middle of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. And I think the movie looked to me like Hitchcock had a checklist shiznit that he wanted to film, and kind of twisted the plot through those like a thread. And lo and behold, if it still didn't work some way. So I'll give that the credit. But for me, Cary Grant delivering lines and being an inspiration, like as you're telling that story, that concept, Demos, I'm picturing, there's the famous line that that, or it should be famous line from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, our situation has not improved. I feel like there's a moment where Cary Grant could have dropped that line somewhere in that movie. I'm just saying.
Through many parts of that movie, because it just keeps escalating.
I watched this movie with a fully open palate saying, all right, whatever you're going to give me, let's go. I love the dialogue. It's the simple things that had me laughing. I mean, just the conversation that Thornhill is having with the police officer whenever he gets his one phone call.
Sergeant Emil Klinger. No, I didn't believe it either.
Something about the name Emil is just too much. I encourage, anyone that gives any credence to anything that I say about movies on this show, check this movie out, man. It will surprise you, bro. Because when I watched the movie, the first thing that came to mind as far as comparing it to a movie now is Date Night with Steve Carell and Tina Fey. If you haven't seen that film, they go out, they steal someone's reservation at a restaurant, and then they are then perceived to be that person whose identity they stole. So they go throughout the movie trying to clear their name. We got Thornhill, and then Date Night is Triple Horn. I have a newfound love for this movie. This will not be the last time that I watch this movie.
That is a recurring theme with Hitchcock, taking the ordinary man and placing him in the extraordinary circumstance. The screenwriter literally had one objective, and it was to write the Hitchcock film to end all Hitchcock films. He wanted to write the ultimate one. And this is a culmination. Hitchcock was famous for two different types of films, the Man on the Run film and the psychological thriller. Between 58 and 59, he arguably created the best of both, the other one being Vertigo, which at one point we will have to talk about, being that this year is the 60th anniversary. But overall, the film is a fantasy. The film, one character even makes a joke of that today would be considered meta, in that it's so ridiculous I can't help but laughing. And it is, I think it's that infusion of comedy and kind of like, despite its suspenseful scenes, kind of like the lightweight approach that Cary Grant specifically sells so well that gives this film its charm.
I love my wife. I'm secure in mine. I don't mind saying this dude was a tall drink of water.
Yo,
he was the personification of what they meant back in the day by tall. I use dark use loosely, but tall, dark, and handsome. That's ultimately what they were talking about with Cary. I mean, and throughout the film, it doesn't seem like anything gets to him. Like I would chill with the guy because it seems like dude was a chill guy throughout the movie, and at the end of the day, he took care of number one. I mean, he on the run for his life, but that didn't stop him from getting in that train car. I'm just saying. Cary Grant, holla at your boy.
See, that's what's interesting, TJ, is you interpret suave. I'm more about he's the kind of guy that would use the word suave instead of suave. You know what I'm saying? This cat is a goddamn egomaniac and a half. You're supposed to think he's a giant douche, and I'll tell you something. They nailed the fact that you can picture him being a giant douche and still be sympathetic. Why? His mother in that movie is about the most annoying damn human being you, in fact, have ever encountered. I challenge you, okay? Justin Bieber is tolerable next to this chick, all right? I said it. Think it through, TJ. Uh-huh. All right. So the point is this. I mean, Justin Bieber may not bail me out of jail, but at some point I can turn his CD off. That bitch still talking. Anyway, he was in a position to where he bribed his mother $100 to do something, for Christ's sake. Okay? This chick is just a spot and a half and leading to our dude Raja, right? Okay? This guy right here is a piece of work. He's just smart enough to know something's off, but he's so dumb and has a giant ego, he actually thinks this blonde chick hooked up with him for real. That didn't strike anything for you? Well, I mean, you might have struck something, but I mean, that was consensual. The punchline, though, being this is what makes Thornhill such a uniquely difficult character to portray. He is a straight up cocky douche executive. The kind of dude that I get paychecks written for, only for my opinion to be ignored by that guy because he's signing the same paychecks, okay? Hickus, motherfucker. There's another bleep for you, Demos. 2 in this episode right in a row. At least you won't have to work to find it.
You know what I think is the most ironic and probably one of the most hilarious jokes that the film plays, and it's a subtle one. It's the fact that he as a character, right? What is his job? He's an advertising man. He is his job is to sell fabrication. And yet, throughout the whole film, he can't sell anyone on the truth.
Yep. Moreover, he's an advertiser. He makes advertisements and fronts for a living. Can't figure out nobody on this mother is fronting. Really?
It tells a story. It's about fiction. It shows a simpler time where all you have to pay is a $2 fine to get out of trouble for, a DWI. And when all I have to do to prove my innocence is call my mom, and she's going to come and she's going to stand up and she's going to say this isn't his character. And when he's in front of the judge, how long have you known this man? I've known him for 7 years. This isn't like him. And then the judge is inclined to believe this man enough to where, and look, they let him go. I mean, really, it's a simpler time. It told a story about a time that I'm not familiar with. I enjoyed the watch.
See, but here's the thing. You have to recognize this too, TJ, and you may not know this because this delves in back into older TV and simpler times in itself. That judge had to comply on federal mandate because he was speaking to the chief of control. And Agent Maxwell Smart is among his minions, okay? You don't want to bleep with that guy.
I'm glad you noticed that. Chief from Get Smart. As much escapism as this film is, I do like the theme of identity that runs throughout the film. Everybody in this film has a front. The deceptive femme fatale from the villains portraying themselves as members of the UN to even arguably Martin Landau hiding his homosexuality for James Mason, which is Hitchcock always liked to play that trope a little bit. To even Cary Grant, Roger O. Thornhill. The O doesn't stand for anything. He's putting on his own front.
Roger O. Thornhill. What does the O stand for?
Nothing.
Dr. Richard H. Thorndike. What does the H stand for?
Hasa.
What?
Harpo.
What's I think fascinating about this film is to take this character who spends 2/3 of it trying to prove to everybody in the world that he is not this fictitious spy. He is not George Kaplan. And by the end of the film, he transforms into George Kaplan. He becomes the spy. Everything that he purports that he's not, he becomes at the end. So there's that arc that still runs through all these incredible scenes. Now I know you mentioned the crop dusting scene. It didn't live up to your expectations, Kyle. Now this scene is interesting for a number of reasons. Hell, there have been classes that have been taught about everything from the editing to the shot composition from the very beginning of this scene. When you think of Hitchcock, one of the very first things that people think about is probably the shower scene in Psycho, the enclosed, lonely spaces where you could be vulnerable and be preyed upon, right? Northwest takes all of this and does the inverse. It takes public, safe, daylit spaces and turns them into claustrophobic nightmares. The openness of a cornfield suddenly becomes something terrifying. You can't escape. You can't run anywhere. The United Nations becomes the set piece for a murder. Mount Rushmore, the grand landmark of Mount Rushmore, becomes a stage for a legendary battle.
This fits with that less is more theme thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like going back to the beginning where, he ends up getting all forcefully sloshed, which again is one of those scenes that would not work in cinema today because they'd be wondering like, well, how were they able to get him to just drink it all by having him hold it down? Wouldn't his suit be wet? Excuse me. Wouldn't his suit smell like alcohol? Was that why the officer brought him in? He wouldn't have needed a breath of life. Oh my God. STFU. Okay. All we saw is this big lurch wannabe looking dude pouring, an exorbitant amount of iced tea prop from a bourbon bottle into a pretty tall, it was definitely a tall glass, looked like a pint glass, and being like, you finna get him to hit this whole fifth, and then it cuts to him being passed out in the car. It's that silent setup piece. You don't necessarily know how everybody got from let's just say, A, start the scene, C, profit, B, question mark. That B, though, you're okay with being without because the C helped you fill in that blank.
Well, it trusted its audience to be able to fill in the blanks. There wasn't a need for extra exposition, which we see nowadays in many, many films. The opposite can be true, too, where people leave too much out and then people get angry, like, I don't know, like The Last Jedi comes to mind. But Hitchcock was always much more interested in the visual story. And that goes back to his days practicing his craft during the silent era. There's something to be said about those auteurs that started in that era, and that was all that they could rely on, that made them masters of their craft by the time that the special effects and the sound industry and so forth caught up with them.
To go back to the crop dusting scene, I totally co-sign with you. I think that being in in a big field and not having anywhere to go is probably got to be one of the. I mean, it's got to be just as bad as being in a bathroom. Somebody's trying to kill you, and you've only got one way out. Whereas when you're in this huge field and you're hiding, and then I'm just gonna drop this poison on you so I can get you up and running again. What can you do? I mean, it's really one of them situations where we can talk all day. Oh, I do this, I do that, but when you're in that situation. That cat made the most of the opportunity that he had, man.
He does the impulsive yet logical thing that I think most people would do: run towards try to get help by the road, run towards the corn crops, try to hide in there. There is nothing. There are a few things that this character does in this film that make you think, oh, no, nobody. I would never do something like that in a million years, other than maybe grab the knife after the guy's been stabbed. But.
Yeah. Can't co-sign that one, bro. Cannot co-sign that one at all.
I mean,
let him fall. Let him fall, bro.
Listen, the reason why we know to do that now, though, be fair.
True.
It's North by Northwest is a public service announcement. If somebody gets stabbed to death in front of you, don't grab the knife. Thank you, Mr. Hitchcock. And then pose for it for the press. I mean. So now I guess at the end, we have to ask the question of whether or not it's required viewing.
So here's the thing. There are many things in life that that are applied with the term overrated. I'm not saying North by Northwest is overrated. I'm examining the term overrated, right? When people say that something is overrated, people automatically think, oh, you don't like it. No, it's just overrated. Listen, I have been to, let's say, Seasons 52 restaurant. Very fancy, excellent ambiance. If I was still playing the field, I would take dates there, sure enough. But for the money you pay, it's overrated. It's still a great restaurant experience. And if somebody were to give me a Seasons 52 gift card, I would use it. Hell, I've had a birthday dinner at Seasons 52. It's overrated, but it's still good. Now,
thank you for the Yelp review.
I mean, isn't that essentially on this show so far? But I digress. No, listen. But 4 stars, bitches. No. I praise this movie up and down. There are so many things in it that are great. There are so many ways I enjoyed myself. The cross duster seemed to be a little cheesy. Like, how did this guy get a gun with the airplane? And how shitty a pilot is he that he's flying so low he rams a damn gas tank truck, whatever. Still well executed cinematically. I'm not condemning the movie for it, but those questions are asked. There's some elements in it that are, lacking a better word, cheesy. I know it's the 50s and all this other stuff, but the example that comes to mind is at the end of the movie, That transition where he's reaching for her and it flips into them in wedding dress and wedding garb was so damn cheesy that even the parody movie didn't do it that ridiculously. Okay? Think that through, folks.
Did you catch the joke? For a man named Hitchcock, he ends with a dick joke. He pulls her up in bed and then immediately cuts to a train penetrating a tunnel.
Oh, no, I did notice that. But yeah, man, I caught that too. That was funny. And while scenes like that don't derail me per se, there's certain things that keep that movie from being perfect for me. For example, it was more about filming in exotic locales and threading that together than it was giving me an experience. The dialogue was way too good for it trying to get exotic and be fancy. I really could have done without the final battle being on Mount Rushmore. You didn't really have to do the crop dusting scene, in my opinion. That all being said, this is a great movie. This is a movie that should be appreciated. This is a movie I recommend. This is a movie that when my child is old enough, I will make sure she will see. However, it is not required viewing.
All right, I'm going to call it required, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't like attacking my dude because Kyle is my dude. Y'all can't tell, but we're brothers from another mother. So I don't like attacking him, but going off of the argument as to why you said it wasn't. All right, so first off, the crop dusting scene is very vital to the movie. Why is he out there? He's out there because the girl that he just smashed uglies with, that he is so enthralled with, even though he plays, because he's been married twice, he plays like a pimp, but she opened his nose wide. And she told him that that's where he needed to be. And he trusted her. And because this is an espionage movie with wild locales like Bourne and Bond, we got to go to different places. He took her at her word and went exactly where it was. And he didn't even question that it was in the middle of nowhere. And while he's out there and he's looking around and he's like, all these cars riding by fast, where's this dude at? Where's this dude at? He finally sees somebody pull up and he just knows that that's the guy. He even fits the measurements of what he expected the guy to look like. Shorter than him because the suit was smaller than him. So he walks over to the dude. Are you him? I wouldn't suspect so. Gets on the bus and pieces out. And the plane, they were trying to kill him. They were setting him up. The thing that got me the most weak about this movie is the fact that the CIA knew that this innocent man was being framed and didn't give two shits. They were prepared to let him die.
Real quick, of all the campy shit, that was probably among the more realistic. Let's be clear.
They were prepared to let this man die to save their operative. And the reason that I like this movie is because, for one, it was like probably the only thing from the 1950s that happened in this country that I can actually say I'm proud of. But that right there, I mean, Hitchcock did a good job. Hitchcock is like James Brown. He's like Earth, Wind, and Fire. Everybody's sampling this man. And if you look at it as an espionage movie, a spy movie, then you wouldn't think that the locale is too outrageous, because again, we're seeing Bond jumping off planes, we're seeing Bond Mission Impossible, we're seeing little ass Tom Cruise hanging off cliffs and hanging from rooftops. So if you look at it as an espionage movie, then you're not completely blown away by the locale, because ultimately what we want to do now in these big budget movies is put these really awesome locales. You want to put the Statue of Liberty in there. You want to have the Golden Gate Bridge in there. How many times have we seen the Golden Gate Bridge blown up? So the fact that they got Mount Rushmore in there, to me, just makes me feel like this is just one of those early stage big budget kind of spy movies where they want to include this big time monument.
You're making a good point. And what I'm going to throw in here is called the cornbread defense. All right? Listen, there are times where it's just me that's the problem. I'm going to say something else and use the word overrated. Cornbread is overrated. That's right. I know.
No, Demos. It's okay. Cornbread is overrated unless it's mine. Holla at your boy.
Oh, shit. Well, you didn't go say something that obvious. I mean, I understand that I am one of few people in America that feel that way. Okay? And I get that I'm the problem. Here's where also I am the problem. And it's kind of the problem I've had. I'll even link it to a modern production as I had to stop watching the Netflix series of The Punisher because I was just too able to connect the dots in a lot of the suspense they were trying to build and figure out what was going to happen before it did. When they threw in South Dakota, what the shit is that doing? Oh, you're going to crawl on a president's nose. Wonderful. Observing Hitchcock is a required viewing. Which thing you view, you're starting to nitpick at that point. Like, I don't know. I haven't seen enough Hitchcock to see like, yes, you should see that. But again, and I've alluded to this before, there are some movies where you could pull certain scenes out and see those and show those in the class and get the point across. However, unlike Blade Runner, North by Northwest does happen to be an enjoyable film all in all when you watch it. At the end of the day, at this point, and listen, maybe the problem is that I am the default, that I am not the critic, that I am not a cinephile. I'm just somebody who apparently watches enough movies to fake it. I don't know. And part of it may have been expectation too. Listen, my expectations were raised so high going into this movie. It faced the same issue that The Godfather did when I went to sit down saying, all right, mother beep, entertain me.
Well, I'm actually really happy that you brought up this point, Kyle, because one of the things that I have heard from many who have seen the film, who they mirror a lot of your sentiments here. It's the fact that so many people, so many other films have eaten away at many aspects of Northwest. What was fresh in 1959 has now become cliche. And a lot of people can't put aside that this is the birthplace of what has become cliche. If you were to sit down and actually just try to deconstruct the plot of the film, yes, the plot is ridiculous, but that's the joke. One of the things that Hitchcock imparts in this film is that he just wanted to put the audience through it. He wanted to put them through the motion. As TJ has said many times on the show, he is there for the experience, he is there for the ride. And this is a film that is very much about the experience and the ride. But even more so, there are still elements that you can still pull apart. There's artistic merit to this. Hal, and when you talk about visual storytelling, take a look at the outfits. And this is one of the rare times I'm going to talk about outfits when it comes to a movie. Look at the outfits Eva Marie Saint wears throughout the film. It tells its own story. It tells everything you need to know about the character. She starts in black and white. The duplicity of the character. The moment that the audience and Cary Grant knows that there's a deceptive quality about her. A true deceptive quality about her. What is she wearing? She's wearing a red and black dress. She is a Black Widow spider. By the end of the film, once they're both firmly on the same side, she's wearing orange, a warm color. Everything you need to know about the character, you can see just by her damn dresses. I only have a one-word response to everything you just said about the film, TJ. Seconded.
Boom.
Yes,
I believe it's required viewing. Kyle, I'm sorry you're outvoted.
I got no beef with you guys calling it required. It's on the edge. It's on the edge for me. My heart just tells me no, even though my brain is like, oh yeah, this is great. I just can't click over to it being required. I don't know what's stopping me exactly. And what I would even say, and I'll even be man enough to announce it on the show, as we go on to sample more movies and I change my mind, which could very well happen with this movie. This movie is the single oddest place I've been, because there have been times where I've come on the show before, show beforehand, knowing no was going to happen, and then I flipped. This one, less so, because there's something that doesn't quite grab me. It's sound, it's technical, it's fun, it's kind of a thinking movie. That's what got me in trouble in the first place. But it didn't really make me feel anything other than, hey, I'm having fun, which is fine. Hey, listen, I'll go through some popcorn. My little girl loves eating popcorn with me, and I'm trying to, eat a little bit more sensibly either. So that's a relatively good snack so long as you don't slather it in butter.
If you haven't watched it, I hope that this will encourage. folks to check it out, man, because it definitely is. It's a fun ride, man. I had a great time watching.
So overall, required viewing, followed by a recommendation from Kyle. Follow me on hilaritybydefault.com for weekly movie reviews and other fun stuff. On Twitter, @defaulthilarity, and on Facebook, Hilarity by Default. And TJ, thank you so much for joining us yet again. Where can we find you?
As always, man, thank you again for having me. I think people, if y'all like me being on, comment. Make him have me on more. Don't let him ban me, people. But I can be followed on Twitter at Tokeo J. That's TOKEOJ, as well as Snap. Not on Facebook anymore. Finally gave up that demon, but Twitter, Snap, I'm still there. And if you're lucky enough to have my number, text me, man. I get bored sometimes at work.
And Kyle, where can everybody find you so they can complain about how wrong you were?
I'm holding up my fist to solidify my protest against the banning of Big TJ. Listen, man, if I'm wrong on this one, tell me. I got no beef with it, dude. I'm not one of these cats who says, don't at me. Like, by the way, people say that like they're tough. Isn't that like one of the most bitch things to do? Don't at me. No, screw that. I said something controversial. At me all you want.
At me.
That's it, mother fool. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at the SOTG, and of course on Facebook as the student of the game. So last week I wrote up my stupid early Super Bowl preview, which, hey, by the time you're watching this, won't be stupid early, but I can guarantee you no one's going to do it quite as silly as I do, unless they're named Greg Easterbrook, but then that way my piece will be under 4,000 words, so that'll be nice.
That is a perfect reminder that life is hilarious by default.